All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling something you guys have been asking about a lot, pattern making, especially for tops. Bodice blocks. You send in some awesome stuff, bits from a blog post, and even a YouTube video all about making a basic bodice block. And this thing about individual balance, I gotta say, that really jumped out at me. I mean, it makes so much
It
sense.
really does. Kind of one of those things you don't think about.
Uh-huh.
But once you do, whoa, it changes everything.
Right, like a total game changer. So, to walk us through all of this, we have an amazing expert here, ready to unlock the secrets of a perfect fit.
I'm ready.
Let's do this. So, individual balance. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's break it down. It's all about the difference in length, front and back of a bodice,
Mhm.
measured right on your body. And it's not just about getting the numbers right. It's about how those lengths work together and how they work with your unique shape. That's what gives you a garment that hangs right. And honestly, it's a big part of whether something actually looks good on you.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I bet everyone listening has had that experience. You try on a blouse, it's your size, but it just sits wrong, like pulling in the back or bunching up in the front. Could that be an individual balance issue?
Totally could be.
Uh-huh.
Think about it. When you're buying clothes off the rack,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about those standard sizes,
Mhm.
right? And those sizes are just averages. They don't really take into account those little differences in length
Mm-hmm.
that make each of us, unique.
Which is where pattern making comes in. It's like instead of trying to fit ourselves into these existing clothes,
Yeah,
we're creating clothes that fit us from the get-go.
exactly. And with pattern making,
Yeah.
we start with your torso, specifically that measurement under the bust,
Mm.
around your rib cage. That's our foundation.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the thing. Those standard sizing charts, they might not match up perfectly with your proportions, even if you think you know your size.
Really? So even if I'm like a size 12, I should still double check against the pattern?
You should. It's
What?
worth it. Actually, there's a really helpful chart linked in that YouTube video you sent.
Oh, cool.
It's free to use. And it shows you the typical measurements that go with different underbust sizes.
Like a little reality check.
Exactly.
Okay, that's super useful. But here's a thought. What if I do all that, get all the measurements right, but when I sew the bodice up, it still doesn't fit right? Is that where this individual balance comes in?
You got it. It's more than just matching a generic chart. It's about making that pattern work with your body.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do we actually figure out our individual balance?
It's actually super easy. 3 steps. First, you measure the front length, starting at the highest point of your shoulder, going over the bust apex. That's the fullest part of your bust, by the way. And you measure it down to your waistline.
Okay, shoulder to waist over the bust. Got it. What's next?
Then you measure the back length, starting at that bony bump at the back of your neck,
Mhm.
and measure straight down to the waist.
So now I've got two different lengths.
Yep.
One in the front and one in the back.
Right. And for the final step,
Mm.
you subtract that back length from the front length. And that difference, that's your individual balance.
So, for example, if my front length is, say, 50 centimeters and my back length is 45 centimeters, that would mean my individual balance is 5 centimeters.
Right. You nailed it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. There's this thing called optimal balance, and it changes based on your bust size.
Optimal balance. So is that like the ideal difference between the front and back length?
Exactly. And the video gives some great examples. If your bust measurement is, let's say, between 80 and 89 centimeters, the optimal balance is about 3.5 centimeters. But if your bust is larger, say between 120 and 129 centimeters, that optimal balance goes up to 5.5 centimeters.
So the larger the bust,
Yeah.
the larger the optimal balance tends to be.
Exactly.
That makes sense, I guess. Like you'd need more length in the front to accommodate the curve of the bust.
Exactly. And that's why we can't just rely on generic size charts. Now, in the video, they had an example. The front length was 52 centimeters and the back was 44. That gives an individual balance of 8 centimeters.
Okay, 8 centimeters difference.
And in their example, the person's bust measurement was 127 centimeters. And for that size, 8 centimeters happens to be the optimal balance.
Oh, wow. So they got lucky.
They did.
But what happens when our measurements don't line up so perfectly?
That's when the fun part starts. That's where we get to fine-tune the pattern
Mm-hmm.
and really make it yours. It's all about making those little tweaks to the basic bodice block
Yeah.
to make it truly yours.
It's like we're taking back control. Instead of forcing our bodies to fit the clothes, we're making the clothes fit our bodies.
Exactly. And this idea of optimal balance, the fact that it exists and that it changes depending on bust size,
Mm-hmm.
it tells us something about how clothes are designed and sized in general.
Yeah. It makes you think, how many times have we struggled to find clothes that fit, not realizing it was an individual balance issue all along? Like that gap in the back of a shirt,
Yeah.
or that weird pulling across the bust. Maybe it wasn't our bodies, but a mismatch in those front and back links.
It happens all the time. It shows how those standard sizing charts,
Yeah.
they're a starting point, sure, but they can't account for all the variation in our bodies.
Right, because they're based on averages, which means they're not going to work for everyone.
Exactly.
That's why I love sewing. It's about taking control of how our clothes fit. So if my individual balance is off, how do I actually adjust the pattern? The video mentioned adjustments might be needed at the waistline too.
Great question. Adjusting a pattern might sound scary, but it's really not that complicated. Think of your bodice pattern like a puzzle. You've got the front piece, the back piece, they need to fit together just right. If your individual balance is, say, bigger than the optimal balance, it means your front piece needs to be a bit longer. You're adding a little extra length to that front piece,
Yeah.
so it can drape over the bust without pulling.
So it's about strategically adding length to the front or back to balance things out.
Exactly. And that YouTube channel we mentioned, Verity Designer, they have tons of videos on specific adjustments. We'll be sure to link that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Now, about those waistline adjustments. Remember how we started with the under bust measurement? That sets the foundation. But from there, the pattern has to curve out to accommodate the bust and then curve back in at the waist.
Right, because our bodies aren't perfect cylinders.
Exactly. And just like with individual balance, we have to think about how much that pattern needs to curve at the waistline to match our proportions.
Makes sense.
For example, someone with a larger difference between their bust and waist measurements might need more shaping at the waistline to create a flattering fit.
It's like fine-tuning those puzzle pieces to get everything just right.
That's a great way to think about it. And the cool thing is, once you understand these basics, individual balance, waistline adjustments, you can apply them to so many different garments. It's not just tops. Think about dresses, jackets, even swimsuits.
Whoa, so it's like unlocking a secret code that opens up a whole new world of sewing possibilities.
Exactly. And it can even change the way you shop for clothes off the rack. You'll start to look at garments with a more critical eye, noticing things like the length, the drape. You might even start to just know intuitively when something's not going to fit right based on your individual balance.
Wow, this really is a game changer. It's about so much more than just sewing. It's about understanding our bodies, appreciating our unique shapes, and having the power to create clothes that really fit and flatter us.
You got it.
Okay, I'm so ready to start experimenting with all of this, make some clothes that fit like a dream. But before we go too far, I want to think about the bigger picture here. We've talked about how optimal balance and individual balance can vary so much. What does this tell us about inclusivity in fashion? I mean, how do we design and produce clothing in a way that celebrates the amazing diversity of human bodies?
That's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, I think this idea of individual balance, it gives us a way to rethink how we approach sizing and fit. Like imagine if, instead of squeezing everyone into a limited number of sizes, we started with the idea that everyone's body is unique and design clothes from there.
Right, yeah. That would be amazing. It would mean moving away from those standardized charts
Yeah.
and recognizing that our bodies, they're not just about numbers.
Totally.
It's proportions, curves, all those little things that make us, well, us.
Absolutely. What if, instead of just using bust, waist, and hip measurements, we started using individual balance too?
Oh, interesting.
Maybe clothes could be labeled with a range of optimal balance values so you could see right away if something was likely to fit.
I love that idea. It would be like a secret code for finding the perfect fit. You could walk into a store, look at the tag, and just know.
Right. And for people who sew,
Yeah.
imagine patterns could be drafted with individual balance built in.
So much easier to get a customized fit. I'm getting excited just thinking about it. A whole new world of fashion where everyone feels good in their clothes.
It's a beautiful vision, and I think it's possible. By understanding and embracing individual balance, we can challenge those old ideas of the ideal body and make fashion more inclusive and celebratory.
This has been eye-opening for sure. Understanding my individual balance. It's not just about sewing a well-fitting top. It's about appreciating my body, being myself, and making fashion better for everyone. So for our listener who's ready to jump in, what's your advice? What's the first step?
First, get your measuring tape and figure out your individual balance. See where you land. And start paying attention to how that affects the fit of your clothes.
Okay, great tip.
And then, if you're up for it, dive into pattern adjustments. That Verity Designer channel, remember?
Yeah, a goldmine of information.
Total goldmine.
And even if you don't sew, knowing about individual balance can change how you shop.
You'll start to notice those fit details,
Oh.
and you'll be more likely to find clothes that flatter your shape.
Such good advice.
And remember, you're not alone in this. There are so many sewists and fashion lovers out there who care about inclusivity and finding the perfect fit. Connect with them, share your experiences, support each other.
I love that. It's amazing to think that something as simple as individual balance can make such a big difference. It changes how we see ourselves and how we see fashion as a whole.
It's a powerful reminder that we can all make a difference through the clothes we make, how we shop, the conversations we have.
So well said. Huge thank you to our expert for being here today.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us. We hope you feel inspired to create clothes that truly fit and flatter you. Sewing is a journey of discovery and self-expression. Embrace the process, have fun, and celebrate your individuality. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Until then, happy sewing and happy fitting.